One way or another, the best actor disappears.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.
Greetings and salutations. My name is JJ Weinberg. I am an artist, I'm an activist, an alchemist, an author, a radio show host, and I am none of these things. Every episode we start that way. Why? Give you a little bit of context about maybe some of the things I've done. But I say I'm none of these things because I wake up every morning and I'm a mystery unto myself. I think I'm still learning about myself. And I'm still growing. And I don't want frames to define me. First, I want to thank everybody at WVLP, specifically Greg, right now, for reaching out to me. He reminded me that I haven't sent in an episode yet this week. And here we are now. Thanks to Greg, because I probably would have been lost because I've been really, really focused on a couple of things. In February, as we talked through, I was doing February album writing month, working on music again. But I also started looking for, well, I didn't start in February. It's been a year that I've been looking for a building in Gary. I've not talked about this a lot on the show, but I'm president of Silver Stray, a nonprofit based in Gary. And Silver Stray does free microchipping, free vaccines, free spay and neuter for Gary pet families. So keeping pet families together is the motto. But pets, they act like the Trojan horse. Gets us into families, learning the greater needs of the family, and finding other ways that we might be able to help. So I've been looking for over a year for a building, and definitely the last 3 or 4 weeks have been really, really heavily focused on the notion that there's been a building not just identified, but that we have actually made an offer on the building, and we're fundraising as we speak. We've got a lot of those funds raised. So been a lot of activity there. If you get a chance, go to silverstray.org. Watch the video I made there. You can see what one of our outdoor clinics look like. But now we're finally going to have a building. After 3 years, the organization will have a building, a place to operate out of, a place to expand from. It's going to be, this is really huge and something that I particularly am honored to be a part of. And it's going to be the first and only in the nation, the whole United States. So probably potentially in the world. I don't know if this exists somewhere else, but in the United States, it doesn't. It's going to be the first and only free access to care and career pathway veterinary clinic. Period. Free access, brick and mortar. But we're going to be doing a lot of different things out of that space. So if you get a chance, go to silverstray.org and check that out. And also, of course, I have to thank my sponsor for this show, Perspective, Voga Barnes and Denny. Wouldn't be here without them. All of that said, last couple of weeks, right, I was talking about enemies, these notions of perspectives, who's a bad guy, who's a good guy, some of the cliches. And it's crazy because I got on that path and chased that rabbit for a little while because of the war in Iran. And I wouldn't have been doing that. And I kind of got derailed from an idea that I wanted. I have notes for it. I had notes for it back from, it looks like February 13th was the first set of notes that I took for this show and the stuff that I wanted to talk about here. This idea of the actor being optional. So we're talking about all these different jobs that AI is going to replace. And for the first time, artists, creatives are kind of getting some of that existential rub that blue collar workers have felt at any given point in time when they think, oh, my job is at risk. And they think some other is going to take it. And now it's AI as an artist is going to take my job as a visual artist or as a musician, and now even as actors. So this idea the actor is optional, it's crazy because I had this theory and this idea that I recorded a perspective podcast when I was just doing YouTube videos. I think it was back in 2020 when I first started doing this. And I had this idea about the actor cube. And it would be like, you get the Tom Cruise cube. Like you can lease, if you're a studio, this was the idea I had in 2020. If you were a studio, you could lease the Tom Cruise cube. So you don't necessarily hire Tom Cruise. The cube that you get, and of course, you wouldn't even need the cube because everything can be done via the internet. But the idea was like, it's such a massive set of data, so many files and so much information that it would come on this little kind of cube hard drive processor that you can lease, and you get that. And then you can use that to plug in Tom Cruise into your movie as an artificial intelligence actor. This is 2020 when I was, having this idea and this vision. And it was around, at that time, it was because of deep fakes. So if you can just imagine that notion, even that term, deep fakes, like that was something within the last 5 or 6 years. And now deep fakes, you don't even see them anymore because AI is just creating it all from scratch. But that's where I started to kind of get this actor cube idea. And then I started making notes on this in, I think it was, like I said, February 13th, somewhere around there, 14th. The idea of the actor being optional. So I'm like, okay, you can get the Tom Cruise cube, but what if you don't even have Tom Cruise anymore? I mean, we have Tom Cruise because he's an actor. I mean, I'm just choosing Tom Cruise because he's a major Hollywood actor. It's better to go to probably better actors. And we'll talk about that in the episode. But the idea is we're not really supposed to look at the screen and be like, there's Tom Cruise every 5 seconds, right? But there's this strange shift happening right in front of us. And a lot of people, especially actors and, again, musicians, creatives, they're talking about it like it's just an economic shift. Like it's just like, oh, Hollywood's going to lose some jobs. Artists are going to lose jobs, that type of thing. And we'll be able to make a movie faster, cheaper, cleaner, which is true. That is true. And of course, people only see the negative side of it. As an artist, as a creative that has spent my whole life doing this, I do not feel threatened by the AI at all. I'm using it as a tool to help me create things at a larger scale, to get my dreams and my visions out there in ways that just either wouldn't have been possible or would have taken me so much longer. It's really just allowing me to create more and more and more. And that's what it can do at scale, even in Hollywood. So like right now, one of the reasons why we see Fast and the Furious 16, like you really made that many Fast and the Furious movies, is because they have to go with a formula. Everything becomes formulaic because they're risk averse. There's too much at stake. If you're building a set and that set costs you, $500 million to make just the set, let alone the actors, everything else, you have to, you're going to have to make a ton on this movie. So the decisions on what gets made become very narrow. And what this can do, aside from, okay, yes, there will be some people who build sets that lose their jobs. But where I'm at right now, I'm like, if I'm a set builder, how can I take all of my experience and start translating it into how I can use AI to help me build these virtual sets? Because you can't stop the tide. So it's just like, how do we use the technology to embrace and articulate what we want to do? Because again, those movies now aren't going to cost as much. Does that mean Hollywood makes more? Yes, of course. There's going to be all of that type of stuff. Whenever someone can cut costs and make more money for themselves, that's true. But also, if it democratizes the ability to get things done and made, you're going to start to see more made different types of things. And it lets us create, it's kind of like with music, right? Sorry, I was totally derailing now, but like with music, if you look at Napster, the Napster age, if you look at LimeWire, if you're too young and you don't know what those things are, it's when, music was first coming onto the internet. And it used to be that, through the 60s, 70s, radio was the only way you could hear music, pretty much, and discover new music. There's radio, and then there's MTV. And so there's these gatekeepers, and there was even payola, like, here, let me pay to get this on. And so then you start to see, well, people are familiar with something that's really not that great, but it becomes a hit. We've seen that happen at scale so many times. But when it comes to radio at that time, you had to choose between limited options. Well, when the internet comes, it starts to create a distribution system where discovery is huge. Like, so many people are making music, and the distribution is not the same as it used to be. And so like LimeWire and Napster, you start to download MP3s for free, and then major level artists and major label artists that are like used to just making so much on record sales, they're up in arms, and it's like, you got to create different models. The music industry didn't fall apart. There's still people making music, and not only are there major level artists, major label artists, and artists with major exposure making still a lot of money, there are more artists and more musicians at different scales that are making a living. Maybe they're not making millions, but they're able to live a life and be creative. And so that's what I really feel. There's an ontological shift with this idea of AI in films, even. A shift in what a character is. A shift in what a performance is. A shift in even what a story is and what it means to be alive inside of a story. So we start with the oldest magic trick that we have with storytelling. The author creates a character, sits down, imagines a person that never existed, give them a name, give them a scar, you give them a childhood, you give them hunger, you give them a wound, a dream, a vision, something that they have to do. You breathe them into existence with words. And in that moment, the author is God of that universe, the agent of their existence. The author can make it rain. And the author's the one that makes the door creak open. If you're the author, you're the one that can give them a lover. You can give them an enemy. You can give them a quest. And then you give them an ending. So again, in that analogy, the author becomes a kind of a god. And then there's another trick, the persona. The actor becomes the character. So the actor stands on a stage or in front of a camera, and the challenge, the most sacred challenge with acting, is disappearing right in front of your eyes. So that the greatest acting isn't, look at me acting. The greatest acting is that the actor vanishes and the character walks into the room. That's what I was talking about earlier. That's why Daniel Day-Lewis is revered. That's why Gary Oldman is revered. Because you forget it's them. You aren't watching a person. You're watching a being. And sometimes you don't even know that it's Gary Oldman until the credits roll. I was watching a movie. I remember it was at my dad's house, and it was like HBO or something, and I just caught the movie randomly. I'm scrolling through. It's Skeet Ulrich in this movie, and this guy with a mustache and a cowboy hat on, and he's roaming around the whole thing. I'm watching this movie. I'm like, this is really great. It's like some sort of underground kind of B film, but it's called Nobody's Baby, right? And I was just so wrapped up in it, and I love it. And then I'm like watching through the whole movie, and at the end, I'm like, man, that was really good. Story was good, but the characters were great, and especially this guy with the mustache, like kind of like this real thick Mark Twain. If you get a chance, just look up Nobody's Baby. But I watched through the whole movie. I'm like, who was that? I wonder what this actor's name was. And then I look it up and see that it's Gary Oldman. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I watched through the entire film. It's like a glitch in the Matrix. I'm like, wait, that was him? The entire time. How did he do that? And Gary Oldman, if you've ever seen him in so many different films, he does this. In True Romance, he just becomes that character, disappears. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Gary Oldman, top level, forgetting that you're watching Gary Oldman. You're seeing who he becomes. That's craft and sacrifice. You don't, again, I was talking about Tom Cruise earlier. No disparagement to Tom Cruise, but like I see Tom Cruise every time I'm watching a film, I know it's Tom Cruise. So in part, when we're celebrity, we celebrate these people for different reasons. We celebrate the artistry of Gary Oldman, of Daniel Day-Lewis becoming Bill the Butcher and disappearing himself, staying as Bill the Butcher even while he's off set, total method acting. And that way, I think probably Daniel Day-Lewis forgets that he's Bill the Butcher, or forgets that he's Daniel Day-Lewis. He's just Bill the Butcher. But with Tom Cruise, it's kind of like, there's the, hey, this is a good looking person, and the smile and the charisma. And that's the like celebrity side of just, that's why we choose, him as an actor. And I don't know, the counterparts on the, say Megan Fox or something, it's okay. Oh, these are attractive people. So they're easy on the eyes, and they're, just drawing us in through some sort of biological imperative, right? But they're not necessarily the height of the craft. So at the end of, a measurement of what makes an actor great and a film great is the way that an actor can make themselves disappear. So now, what if there's a third trick? What if a character, and this is what I started taking notes on February 13th, 2026. I was going back to my Tom Cruise cube and seeing how far we've come with AI now. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a second. We don't need Tom Cruise anymore. What if a character can be born without an actor? Not a character performed by a human, a character generated into existence with no other self behind the mask. Because there was never a face behind the mask. Just the mask, fully formed, just the character. I was thinking about like J.R. Tolkien sitting down and writing Lord of the Rings and imagining Frodo. And now if you read the books before, that's that whole theater of the mind, right? A lot of times we're like, oh, you got to read the book. The book is so much better. Or when a film comes out and there's an actor in there and it's like, that doesn't look like Frodo looked like in my head. And there's like this level of disappointment. Well, if J.R. Tolkien could create Frodo from the beginning, there would be no doubt this is the character that he created exactly as he wanted him to look. And he can do that now. Well, he can't. He's not here with us anymore. But, George Lucas, if he wants to create another universe, can create the character as it exists in his head. And there's no actor to play. There's no Mark Hamill to play Luke Skywalker. It's just Luke Skywalker that he makes. So the future audience might not always be enraptured by the love of acting as much as being swallowed by the story. And again, being honest, a lot of people don't go to a Tom Cruise movie because they're looking for the deepest human transformation from Tom Cruise. They go because they want to be entertained. They want to be engrossed. They want to be pulled through a narrative like they're being carried by a river. And so if you can give the audience a river and that river never stops, I think the audience is going to drink from it. And that's where I feel like this is going. We're moving towards a world where story stops being just a product of that hour and a half, 2 hour window, and it starts becoming a place. You don't watch a film, you actually visit a universe. And it's running in real time, whether you're watching it or not. That's the horizon. So imagine J.R. Tolkien, George Lucas creates this character in this universe, and his new character, his new Skywalker, is alive. Inside of an AI, inside of a system, inside of a world and a universe that he's created. People hear that, I'm sure, and think I'm being dramatic. I'm not. I'm just telling you, there'll be a time where you can tune into Middle Earth or visit Tatooine like the Truman Show. Not for 2 hours, not for a trilogy. You can tune in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and watch Frodo live. And at that point, it won't even be Frodo hitting plot points. It's Frodo living, walking, sleeping, eating, fearing, hoping, dreaming, whatever it is, making small choices and then large choices and then quiet choices that become the large choices. And then later, maybe later than fans of Frodo's life will compile the highlights into a film. It has me in this really surreal place because that is an analogy of what I've felt like my own life has been like. Something that I've been trying to articulate for the past at least 26 years. And it's feeling like I can see it happening. This notion that we can watch an artificial created character go through his life, and then that people would compile highlights into a film. And sometimes doesn't it feel like somebody's watching your life unfold, especially in those like really traumatic times when you look back on them, or those times where you had an amazing success and everything was clicking and falling into place. It just feels like you can hear the soundtrack rolling. You can feel the wind at your back and you feel like the hero. I've felt like that so many different times in my life. And now I'm like, well, maybe this is a simulation. Or maybe, as I write in my book, Serendipity, according to Francis, maybe I am just a character in a Philip K. Dick novel. But just imagine that, or a system that will curate it for us. But the primary artifact isn't the movie. The primary artifact is the lived stream, this notion that we don't have an actor play Frodo. And what I'm getting at there is like, you can't be worried about it taking your job in that regard. There'll still be stage acting. We'll still want to see people act, of course, at the highest level, especially. Probably what will get replaced first are the people like the attractive actors and actresses. Like, they're just gonna be like, well, yeah, we could just create that. Who cares? And 99% of the time, 99% of people never actually come into physical contact with a, quote unquote celebrity. With Tom Cruise, you're not pressing skin and shaking his hand. As far as you know, he's a figment of your imagination anyway. And so less worry about just the job, I'm saying, and just the negative things that AI can do and technology has done. There, of course, those are all there. But like, we can't forget about some of these bigger questions, these bigger allegories that it's bringing to us. Not just a text shift, a metaphysical shift when we start to think about these things. Because we're about to create worlds that don't need us to press play. They're simply on. I'm a video gamer. I've been playing video games all my life. The way games are going to change in the next 5 years to 10 years, especially, just off the charts. The characters will have their own simulated, they'll really think that they're alive, which becomes scary. And I think part of the existential fright that we have there is because how do we know that's not the same thing in our life? That we're not just, again, an artificial intelligence in a larger technology. That's why it's an uncomfortable question. But if we can create a character with no human actor behind it, and the character behaves like a person, plans like a person, remembers like a person, adapts like a person, suffers like a person, loves like a person, what have we created? A puppet? A person? A mirror? A prayer? Again, even if you go to something biblically, the idea is that we were made in God's image. And he said, over this universe that the author creates, I mean, that's already how it is. You're made in the reflection of your creator. But that's what it starts to feel like. And that's the part I think people miss. People think that the uncanny valley is just visual. If you're not familiar with the uncanny valley, it's this notion that, again, this started really more so in video games. And then the way that CG, computer graphics, started rendering things. And as they approached creating people with a certain level of hyperrealism, the uncanny valley was this notion that we got so close to being real, but then the closer that it gets to real, the subtleties that it misses are what make it seem like, ooh, there's something off about this. There's something wrong here. And, that's probably from around 2010 to 2015 when that really started advancing. And so, like, you're looking at computer graphics and you're like, wow, this looks like a person, but wait, there's something that's really off-putting. That's what they're calling the uncanny valley. We still have that now, visually, specifically, with AI creations. And a lot of times people can say, they can feel it. You can stomach it and say, there's something wrong about that. That will go away. It's rapidly going away. It gets exponentially better. If you're not familiar with the concept of the singularity, Ray Kurzweil is a great person to listen to talk about the singularity. The idea is, though, that technology doubles and it doubles on itself and then doubles on what it doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled until the point that we reach the singularity, which is the notion that once something is created, it's immediately obsolete because everything is so rapidly changing. So with this uncanny valley that exists right now with AI, if you just look at how far visual AI has come in the last year or 2 years, it's just insane. So that will go away. We will not be able to tell at all. And there's a lot of people right now who are already fooled by things. And you have to start questioning your lying eyes, which is one of the dangers, right? The dangers of AI. Like, well, if nothing can be true, then objectively, seeing is believing, right? Perception is reality. Perspective. That's why this show is called Perspective. And we talk about these things. But if you can't believe your eyes and everybody says, well, I don't believe anything anymore, we start to slip into, this kind of nihilism. But Uncanny Valley, it's not just about how a face looks, how the mouth moves, and how the eyes reflect light. That valley, of course, is closing. The gap is closing. You can feel it closing. Audio is closing. Video is closing. Music, it's closing there. The imitation is just getting better and better and better until the distance is just almost all the way gone. But even when the Uncanny Valley collapses, there's still a deeper valley, not pixels or resolution or voice timbre. It's fallibility. Human performance contains risk. And that risk isn't a flaw, it's a signal. It's the proof of life. And that's why I'm saying there'll still be actors. In fact, this might be a renaissance for plays, for stage acting. I mean, until they have androids acting things out on stage, which I think that's pretty much further out. Until you have holograms on stage, I don't know if people will care. You know what I mean? This could be a resurgence of live theater. And I'm not just saying, Broadway in New York, that's been there anyway. I'm saying maybe locally, live theaters start to open. More actors and actresses getting a chance to do live theater right where they're at. Because when you watch live theater, part of what you're feeling is not just the story, you're feeling that tightrope. Like when you watch a musician play, at any given point in time, this person could mess up. Cat Stevens is my favorite musician of all time. I couldn't see him play live, obviously, before I discovered him in that Napster era. Funny enough, right? I was in art school. I was going to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And, I'm just exploring. I'm 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. Your mind is just like a sponge and I'm searching for everything. I'm searching for this spiritual journey that I'm on, this trying to grasp some sort of truth. And one night, TV is on and the very best of Cat Stevens comes on. And I just saw him. Before I even heard the music, I saw this guy with like long hair and a beard. He just looked wise in his eyes. And I'm like, I like this dude. He seems super cool. And I'm like, and what the heck kind of name is Cat Stevens? So then I went on Napster and I searched Cat Stevens and I downloaded a ton of his music. And overnight, he became a North Star for me, not just as a musician, but as a person, his spirit, the way that he looks at life. And so I discovered him through Napster. You know what I mean? And then it wasn't until December of, I think it was 2015, was right like a day or two before or after my birthday. And Cat Stevens had come back, Yusuf Islam, come back to the States to play. It was this miracle because it looked like he was never going to play music again. I got to see him live at the Chicago Theater. And it's like, I would have never known who Cat Stevens was. And I bought, a couple of his CDs, of course, back at that time. A lot of it I just downloaded. But then like I bought a shirt, or no, I didn't buy a shirt. I'm sorry. My friend Clinton bought me a shirt from that day, from his tour. And, so it's like, there's different ways to monetize. But I guess what I'm getting at is I didn't have a chance to see Cat Stevens play live. And he's one of the only musicians that I would really even care to see play live. So it was amazing to see him. But before that, the only way I could see him, and especially not thinking he would ever even come out of retirement, was through this Magic Cat tour that they had on, they had recorded. It was on DVD. I don't think I had the DVD. I just watched it on YouTube or something. But I watched the Magic Cat tour, and through the whole thing, he's like flawless. It's just like so amazing. Such an incredible writer. His melodies, his lyrics, his performance, just top notch. Beautiful, right? But there's one point in the whole Magic Cat tour, the recording, there's only one time when he messes up. And this little flub on the guitar. And then he like smiles and kind of shakes his head, and he's quietly acknowledging that he messed up, but he keeps going. And it's one of the coolest moments ever. It's one of the coolest moments of seeing, hearing, and experiencing Cat Stevens that I've ever had. Because I'm like, that's so cool, so amazing to see, and so raw and so human. And so when you go to see a live musician, that's, of course, AI music can help with different things. Right now, with the songs that I'm recording, I can hum parts that I don't need now a French horn player to play. And I would love to have a French horn player play, but I can't afford to look for a French horn player. I've had a French horn player play on stuff in the past, and I had the notes and everything I needed them to do, and I played it, this and this and that. And in fact, it's so funny. There was one song that I produced. I'll have to play it sometime here from the Energy Commission, our old band. And I couldn't get her to get everything that I wanted in the little bit of time that we had in the recording session. So I had her play these single notes and these little stabs. And then I took those notes and then I rearranged them on the timeline of the song to be able to make it play what I wanted it to play. So now I can just hum that and then turn it into a French horn part. And I get it. That takes out some French horn players at the recording level. But again, right now, I couldn't afford it time-wise. I couldn't afford it financially. And I just wouldn't do it. So that's the alternative. Like, okay, I'm just not going to have the song versus I have a song and AI helped me create it. I'm sorry, I want the song out as part of my legacy, as part of what I'm leaving behind of who I am and what my sound and what my voice was. If you let AI just articulate your voice for you, it's going to sound not great. It's going to sound very, trite. It's going to sound replicated. That happens. It's already happening. But that happens again in Hollywood. That's why we have 16 Fast and the Furious movies. It's no different, right? But the AI isn't going to make a film like Memento or Pulp Fiction. It's like you're going to have your own voice. You can create those kind of films with those tools now and needing less people to do it, but it's not going to create it from scratch because it's derivative by nature. So anyway, this notion that we've got the actor disappearing and the job is going away. No, maybe we have plays, we have more live performances where we're feeling that tightrope. We're feeling the possibility of failure, feeling the fragility that could crack at any second. And then somehow miraculously it holds. Like maybe the person forgot their line and they paused a little bit longer, but that pause was perfect because it allowed us to get into the character's mind, where if they were just reciting it, had it all ready and packed and tight, we wouldn't have that same gap, right? So live music, the voice can shake, a note can be sharp, you miss it, flub it, breath gets caught in the throat, whatever it is. Drummer can rush a beat for a second and then pull back like saving a car from sliding on ice. You feel that humanity in the margin, and the margin creates empathy. So we're not going to lose that. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at this existential notion that there will be storytellers creating the vision of the person that's in their head, the character that's in their head, that doesn't have an actor as a counterpart. So there's, of course, this idea of a future with two currencies. One currency is perfection on demand. The other currency is fallibility as a luxury. with the arts. Oh, look at this. This was made by a human hand. There's a human performance that becomes the vinyl of the soul. I mean, people are buying vinyls again now. Like they never, like, you know, we went through the, again, Napster age. We came from tape cassettes. We moved to CDs. Then we go to burning CDs. And then all of a sudden we're not using CDs at all because we got iPods. And it's like, oh God, the iPod is going to destroy. Did the iPod destroy music? Really? It opened up gates for music. So we go through the digital age and Napster and LimeWire, and people are just downloading. And then now we get to the streaming age where it's like, you don't even need to download, and everything you can just subscribe to a place. And of course, musicians are like, man, this is killing my profit model. Well, think of a new one. That's why you're a creative. You know, would I complain right now? Will I complain when 1 million people hear my song, 1993? I have a song I wrote in February album writing month. It's recorded. It's called 1993. And I promise you, I'm not going to play it now because I'm waiting until I do an album release later this year. And it's probably going to coincide with an art project with my Bob Ross stuff and the Million Bob March and everything. I'll play it then. But I promise you, it's a hit song. Whether or not I can get it into the right hands and get it into enough people to hear it, it is the highest caliber and quality song. It's really incredible. And I'm so excited to share it, but I'm waiting, right? But would I be upset if 1 million people, 10 million people, 100 million people, 100 million streams on that song? If I had 100 million streams, let's just say this, when I have 100 million streams on that song, would I be mad if I didn't make a penny from it? Absolutely not. If I have 100 million plays and I can't execute on that kind of visibility to do something, to sell something else, to create revenue, so like, wow, I'm majorly failing. I mean, even back when, and I kind of diverged off the path here, vinyl, and we got to get back to it. But, you know, the largest part of sales for an artist, even signed artists, a lot of times it was your merch sales, your t-shirts, your concert sales, like tickets, and then even being paid in advance to play a concert or whatever. It's like, so we got to figure out different models. That can't be the reason why we hold back on these things. But back to the human performance becoming the vinyl of the soul. Again, we went through all of those stages, all of those phases, and you can go into a Barnes and Noble, anywhere. I mean, I'm not talking like, there's always been record collectors, right? On not the fringes, but enthusiasts, purists, collecting vinyls. But I'm talking like you can go into Barnes and Noble and there are records there, vinyls. They all but disappeared. Why? Because it's like, oh, here's this physical object. And it's literally something physical that can be destroyed. It can be scratched. It can be cracked and broken. And there's a fragility there, and there's a warmth and an honesty of holding on to this thing when we're so caught in the digital world. So vinyl's here again. You know, it's made a bit of a resurgence. So we can't think that human fallibility will ever be obsolete. It'll be treasured because it has the imperfections or the potentiality for imperfections, because it proves there was a hand on the needle. So acting isn't going to disappear. I think, again, it will just be sacred and rare and expensive for plays, for theater. Because we go back to the actor's craft. The actor's main challenge is disappearance, to make the self dissolve and make the character come forward. But with a synthetic performer, there's no self to dissolve. It's only the character. So the synthetic performer doesn't have to do the hardest part. It's, the synthetic performer starts at the finish line. It begins as the mask. Persona is to put on the mask. And again, this is going to take me in the next episode. We're going to talk about Val Kilmer, this project that I worked on with Val Kilmer's God panels. When I went to Val's studio and saw the God panels for the first time, I was at his studio in his gallery in 2021. I designed Val Kilmer's first digital asset on the blockchain, and we'll get into that. But we'll also get into, I've talked about it a little bit here before. You have to go back in the episodes about the dreamer, about these dreams that I had, again, 26 years ago, where I was an actor on the stage and I was auditioning for a part. But then when I looked out into the audience, I saw 3 people, and they were kind of shadowy at first. But then as I focused, as I'm up there on the stage looking at these 3 people, I realized I know what these are. I could tell, I had a sense that one of them was the director, one of them was a screenwriter, and one of them was a casting agent. But then all of a sudden it came clear, and like the lights came on, and I saw that it was me. Like each of the 3 people, I was the director, I was the screenwriter, and I was the casting agent. I don't mean like there were 3 separate versions of me sitting there, and I was the 4th one as the actor on stage. And so I've talked about this before, life as an allegory, as a stage, and that we are actors, and we wear this mask. And I talked about this in depth in the project and what I did with this Val Kilmer project. And we'll get to it for sure in the next episode because I don't have enough time. But what was so crazy to me, and I'm just kind of setting up for next week's episode, is that recently, remind you, everything I'm talking about here, in some ways, goes back to at least 2020, when I first was thinking about the Tom Cruise cube that you could license to get Tom Cruise's likeness in a film. This is 2020. You could find the video in my Perspective channel here. You'd have to dig, but it's there. So in some ways it goes back to that, but then in many ways it goes back to, again, this dream that I had when I was 18 years old. Okay. But so it goes back another 26 years. Okay. And change. But thinking about it with this notion of George Lucas creating a new universe where the characters exist and he doesn't have actors. They're 100% who they are as this created character from George Lucas's mind. And then as I thought about that, I started taking these notes, and I thought back to, of course, the Tom Cruise cube. And I fast forward to, we go through this whole thing with the war in Iran. So the last 2 episodes, I shifted away from these notes. I shifted away from the stuff that I wanted to talk about episodes back, but it's all about timing. That's this serendipity, these crazy, crazy ways that the universe locks in. I call myself a wizard of intentional serendipity, right? And it makes me think of Gandalf, actually, in Lord of the Rings. He says, wizard. And he says, no, I'm not late, nor am I early. A wizard always arrives precisely when he means. And in some capacity, that's this landing, this notion that I've had these ideas for such a long time. And when I get deep into this Val Kilmer project, the idea of the mask, the idea of the actor and the roles and the dream, and is this a simulation that we're living in? Like this character that George Lucas creates in his AI box that then maybe comes to an awareness that, wait a second, I'm just an AI character and George Lucas made me. What happens when that character, if the AI gets to that point and advances and says, wait a second, I was created by George Lucas. How does that lay over your experience in your life? What if I was created by? So I said, maybe I'm just a character in Philip K. Dick's imagination. Seems like that sometimes. But as I had all these notes and I wanted to write this, and I mean, there's so much more that we'll talk about in the next episode, but I had all of this stuff compiled and ready to go. But then, war in Iran, and I took me off apparently my timeline only to make it land so much heavier and hit me so much harder, because I'm like, no, I was just thinking about this. I was just taking notes and writing about all of this stuff. Wow, how phenomenal to see that Val Kilmer, of all people, is going to be the first actor in human history to be fully represented as AI in a film. So he is one of the lead actors in a feature film coming out this year. I think it's coming out this year. And again, ironically and oddly enough, I think it's called From the Grave. Kind of crazy. But again, as I get into this Val Kilmer work and this project and searching, this is 2021 that I was first in Val's studio. And the work that we'll talk about, one of the main allegories that I'm trying to tell, one of the main metaphors that I was working on through this project for 5 years. Well, I'm sorry. I worked on it from 2021, and we did a screening and a release in 2024. And then I did a screening in Three Oaks, Michigan for this piece of work. And then I did a opening in LA for the same body of work. And I used AI to recreate Val's voice for this production. I had my words, my poetry, all this stuff that I was working on, some of my songs, I was combining all of these things together. But the idea, the allegory, the metaphor was, we begin in spirit, we become physical, and we return to spirit. And what I was trying to do with the body of work and what I'm showing in it is that it begins digital, it becomes physical, and then it returns to the digital. And next thing you know, as I'm thinking about this episode and the Tom Cruise cube and all these crazy things in the AI universe, and there's an actor, a synthetic, I hear the news that Val Kilmer is going to be the first actor in human history to be represented in a feature film fully as AI. How phenomenal is that? There's a quote that I said I know at the screening and the opening for this piece. The piece is called I'm Your Huckleberry, ... Finn. Finn spelled with one N, signifying the end. A lot of stuff to talk about. We'll unpack it in the next episode. But I'm pretty sure in the screening I was, doing an introduction and I had a Q&A afterwards. But there's a quote where Val says, I think he's talking to Larry King. It's on the Larry King interview. And he says, I don't believe in death. Now imagine this is, of course, years and years ago, because Val, if you're not aware, later part of his life, lost his voice. He had throat cancer and he lost his voice, and that's why he couldn't really act anymore. So him saying that, the supreme irony is that I used that quote, among others, from that Larry King interview to help sample to recreate Val's voice. Because for this piece of work where I was collaborating with his idea and his notion of the God panels, I was like, I have to do something worthy of where he's coming from, not just as an actor, but as an artist. And I needed something that would represent some of those things. And that's why I needed his voice to be saying the things I'm saying. But it was a real version of his voice was nowhere. It was in the ether, and then it became physical, and he developed it, and he was a stage actor and became a great film actor, and then he lost his voice. But then it became digital, and I was able to resurrect it in a manner with AI. And it lent itself to the immortality of what I feel like the piece is pointing at. Not a Val as a person, but the idea of immortality itself. So we'll get more into that in the next episode. I'm really excited about it. It's just crazy that it all happened in this frame, in this time with like, why Val? The serendipity of it. Like, this is what my work, I was literally working on that project for at least 3 years. And man, like now it's landing that way. It's just too profound. It's too poignant. But thinking about the perfection of the AI, it's not the same thing as aliveness. Aliveness has, again, the pores, the risk, the chance of failure. And it's like sports. It's why we love sports. We watch live sports because after it's happened, it's like, okay, big deal. I see the box score. Who cares? You know, you watch because you don't know what the next moment is. And if we're watching a Frodo inside of a synthetic world that was created and could still be directed and manipulated and moved around by the J.R.R. Tolkien, but maybe only points that he wants to pull towards. In the middle that, maybe in the middle parts that Frodo has agency. But what if that's what the future of cinema looks like? Where it's watching not because something's written, but because something's being lived. And that's, again, why it's so similar to the dream. You know, a dream is the most ancient simulation we have. In a dream, you're the creator, you're the set designer, you're the casting director, the writer, the editor. You're the one who can bend time and bend space and bend causality and just make it feel normal. And then sometimes if you've ever had one of these moments, you wake up inside the dream. We've talked about this before. You become lucid. Wait a second, this is a dream. And then something else happens. You realize I'm the dreamer. And then you realize I'm the god of this place. Not in an ego way, but you're the author. That's your experience. You're waking up to your authorship inside of a story. And I'll always come back to, what if that's what life is? What if we just need to wake up inside of our own story, inside of our own matrix, inside of our own dream, and realize, wait a second, I'm the screenwriter here. So when I think about AI and synthetic performers and these always on universes, I can't help but feel a parallel. Join me again next Saturday. We'll dive into I'm Your Huckleberry, Finn, to this unfolding mystery and go a little bit deeper into the idea of what acting in AI might mean and what the simulation is and how it correlates to our own lives. What does it mean? Who's wearing the mask? If the eyes are the window to the soul, whose eyes are we looking into when we look into an actor performing? And if Val Kilmer is now being a character in a film, but it's Val Kilmer as an AI, where's the mask? Whose eyes? Who is it? Is it Val Kilmer we're watching portray this character? And do we really need Val Kilmer anymore if we're just using his face as an avatar? We'll get into it next week. Join me next Saturday at noon.
One way or another, the best actor disappears.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.